Dolphins game,
Mhm.
and so his season's done. But and there'll be a big question. I don't know exactly how big it is really, but there will be a question about his 5th-year option going into his final year of his rookie contract, whether they pick that up. I suspect they probably won't pick that up.
Mhm.
But I think when you take away the whole, like, kind of, him being a first round pick, very hyped up, and everyone expecting him to be really good, you just look at the guy that played this year without any of the expectations. He played pretty well, and I think I'll show some examples here. Like this is stuff that he struggled with in his first 2 years, and this play is a really good example of how he has progressed as a run defender. In his rookie year, certainly, and sometimes last year, he was very slow to read run plays, and often when he was playing the Mike linebacker rather than the Will linebacker, which meant he had to try to make all the calls and the checks at the line of scrimmage. Whereas now he's playing the Will with Cody Barton next to him, he's able to just see things and react rather than having to worry about calling things for everyone else. So, and when he's able to play fast like that, you can see plays like this where the Eagles are running a little counter scheme here. They've got the left guard pulling out to kick out the defensive end, and then the tight ends following around and wrapping around to try to block Jamin Davis, and then the running backs following him behind. So we'll see here. Davis reads this really quickly and instantly is triggering. You see Cody Barton is there signaling, but you see Davis is triggering instantly. He's already reading, this guard is pulled. This guy's looking to block down. He's working around the guard and into the backfield. He's meeting this tight end head on in the backfield rather than waiting for the tight end to come and block him. And he goes and blows that tight end up, sheds the block, and goes and makes the tackle in the backfield. So that's the kind of play that he wouldn't have made in his rookie year. He would have been too tentative and thinking about all the different things at the line of scrimmage rather than just going and playing. And this one is another example of.
One second, Mark, if you don't want me interrupting you.
Yeah.
So, did you ever were you scouting Jamin Davis coming out of Kentucky? Like, did you find any certain strengths of his? Like, what were your thoughts of him going? I know we talked about he didn't do this last year, but like it seems like he's getting downhill more. That's definitely an area of growth. But did you see that in Kentucky as well?
Yeah, well, in college he was maybe a little bit more tentative. He certainly wasn't as physical as he is now.
Gotcha.
He was the kind of guy that would run through, so he would have seen that gap and probably run through it. But that tight end coming across might have knocked him off balance because he wasn't playing as physical. Whereas on that play, you could see he ran through that gap. He read the play really quickly, and then he went and blew up the block because he could see it coming and was ready to go and be physical. This type of play is actually more what you saw from him in college, where and probably more what they were hoping to get from him in his rookie year, where we've got a little wide zone run to the left of the offense here. Jonathan Allen is going to make this tough block for the offensive line. They're trying to get a combination block between the center and the left guard on Jonathan Allen. And then one of them wants to try to get up to Jamin Davis. But what happens is Allen stunts inside and kind of blows up what this guy's trying to do, the left guard's trying to do. And that gives Jamin Davis just a clean run to the edge. And this is where we see the athleticism and the range that Jamin Davis was drafted for. So we run this on here. You can see he goes on that wrong shoulder, and that guard kind of gets really messed up
definitely.
He was anticipating Allen to be on that outside shoulder, and he wasn't. And so that gives Jamin Davis this free run just to go and find the ball carrier and go and make the play. And that's the kind of thing we were expecting more of him from college. But this is the kind of thing that we're seeing more of him now, where he's reading things and anticipating things a lot quicker and running through the line of scrimmage before guys are able to come off their block. And again, in his rookie year and last year, he didn't do this kind of thing where as soon as this play starts, he sees this tight end sifting across. He knows this is going to be a run. These two are working a combination up to him, and this, I think it's the center, is trying to peel off and pick him up. But he wants to try to help the guard secure the defensive tackle first. But Davis hits this so quickly that he can't help him. He needs to peel off, and he's late to get back. And Davis, you can see, kind of runs through this gap and goes and makes that play.
Wow, great
makes
play.
That tackle. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing we've seen from Davis as a run defender this year. And he's generally been quite consistent. Obviously, every player has a few hits and misses here, but he's been generally very good as a run defender this year when he's played alongside a true Mike linebacker that's doing the calls. And obviously we had a bit of a spell where Cody Barton was out injured and Jamin Davis was had the Green Dot and was doing the calls and he slowed down a little bit.
Still too much for him, yeah.
Yeah, but once and that is why we saw David Mayo come on the field. Not because David Mayo is a better player than any of the other linebackers they have, but because he could handle the responsibility of being the Mike, and that freed up Jamin Davis to be their best player at the will spot. So, and now that Cody Barton's back, we saw Davis coming back to that kind of thing. Where it's probably a little bit disappointing for a guy that's a first round pick. With the athleticism that he has been in coverage. Now Davis has always been more of a zone coverage guy. He's always been kind of underneath the zone defender that can sit in a zone and have quite a wide vision, understand where routes are coming from and are threats to him, while also reading the quarterback and then breaking down on the ball. But obviously, we've talked a lot this year about the Commanders playing a lot of man coverage, and this is one of those situations where the running back has split outside in an empty formation. Davis has followed him outside, which lets the Eagles offense know that this is man coverage, and he's going to run a little slant and go or a sluggo route where he's faking a little slant route and then goes down the sideline. And Jamin Davis, as we'll see here, he bites pretty heavily on that fake and then gets beaten down the sideline. And fortunately, it's overthrown, but he still gets called for a penalty.
And that's a big ask. I mean, I know it's pretty common around the league. I know we're not just strictly isolating Jamin Davis here, but a linebacker out wide trying to cover a running back in the open space, like he's at a disadvantage. And there have been some good plays. I believe it was Bijan Robinson, earlier in the year where he kind of covered him, maybe even got an interception off that play coming out of the backfield. So like there is some good that we're seeing from them. But I kind of want to go through one more passing play, one more pass defense, and kind of talk to you about like next steps with Jamin Davis. So go ahead. Perfect. I want to see this play here.
Yeah, so this one's just another example of how teams have tried to attack him with the amount of man coverage Washington has played. And I think we've all kind of cottoned on to this fact that their teams are running wheel routes at him and trying to get him matched up on the running back. And that can be a tough situation for any linebacker. As you said, like if you think of it from an offensive perspective, if Washington are splitting Antonio Gibson, or if you're San Francisco and you're putting Christian McCaffrey out wide,
or Saquon Barkley right here. This is one of the best dynamic players in the league. Exactly.
Hard, so you're when you're an offense, you're thinking, I don't care who that linebacker is, I don't care how athletic they are, I'm winning that matchup. But when you're Washington and you've drafted this linebacker as an incredibly athletic linebacker with the 19th overall pick, you're kind of hoping that he can hold up to this, and obviously he's struggled a little bit, and that's what we see here. Obviously he peels off and tries to match this wheel route, and Barkley gets the better of him, and the Giants get their touchdown. And I mean, it is a nice throw, but this one was more of an example of how Davis is more suited to playing sort of zone coverage, and this play kind of shows all the kind of checks that happen in just as before the ball is snapped. You can see before the snap, Davis is matched up man-to-man coverage with the running back, which we've seen a couple of times already, obviously with Saquon Barkley and another couple of backs. And but just before the ball is snapped, Hurts sends this running back out to the flat here. And so what happens is Cody Barton takes over that responsibility, as Barton's already on this side of the field. And Jamin Davis plays Barton's role, which is sitting in the middle of the field and watching for crossing routes. And so we'll just let that roll out here. You can see that Barton now picks up that, matches that running back out to the flat, and that means Jamin Davis has got this role sitting in the middle of the field, and that's something that suits his game a lot more. Jamin Davis,
exactly.
He's much better in this kind of situation where he's able to sink back, and you can see he's already turned his head. He's identified where this crossing route's coming from, and then they're able to pass this off because St. Just here is the slot corner trying to cover a shallow cross, and we know shallow crosses are very hard to cover man-to-man because you're always out leveraged. So that's exactly what Jamin Davis is there for. He identifies it, he breaks on it, he cuts it off, and then St. Just replaces him as that whole player. And you might say, oh, well, this leaves Jamin Davis on a wide receiver, but that's just the way the coverage works.
That's the way it goes. And there's only so many time how much time you have in the pocket as well. Got to get rid of the ball pretty quickly. So I like that.
Exactly.
It's good communication as well. Like, that's one thing I take away from this. I feel like all year long there has been poor communication with the defense. We saw some positive communication right here. And to your point, like Jamin Davis is a pretty tall linebacker. Like, I remember seeing him at training camp. I believe he's 6'2" or 6'3". I think it's kind of cruising in the middle of the defense, kind of dropping back in zone does suit him. And it's interesting altogether because it feels like the players on Washington, Kendall Fuller, Emmanuel Forbes, Jamin Davis, are more suited for a zone scheme. But I just don't understand why we kind of were so man heavy all year long. Seems like it's a mismatch.
Yeah. I don't really understand either, because that it was the zone stuff they did so well last year that made their defense so good at the end of last year, and obviously we saw they drafted Forbes and as a zone corner to fit that scheme, and then they went away from it. So I'll never know why they did that, but yeah, you can see here playing that zone in the middle of the field, he's then able to match that route, take it away, and Jalen Hurts is obviously looking to try to hit that, and that route's not there. The pressure comes, and Hurts has to bail out and scramble, and then St. Juste does a nice job chasing him down and keeping that game to a minimum. But yeah, that was what I had on Jamin Davis, just kind of showing that there has been growth and development there. He's a much better run defender than he was when he first came out. He's a lot more aggressive, not sort of waiting and reading things at the line of scrimmage. He's just playing a lot quicker and a lot more free, which is good. Yeah. He still has some growth to go in coverage, and obviously when you've drafted a guy in the first round at a linebacker and one that's as athletic as him, you kind of hope that he turns into that guy that can be your matchup on athletic tight ends or running backs, but he just hasn't. That's not his game, and he's much more suited to zone. And we can see when he does play zone, he plays all right. It'll be an interesting offseason for him, especially now, depending on how bad this shoulder injury is. We'll see how long that takes him to recover. But I suspect he'll be one of the starting linebackers. I would hope any new coordinator that comes in would be like, okay, he's going to be our will. We're not going to put him at Mike. He struggles in Mike. We need to find a new Mike linebacker, but Davis is fine at will. So let's
talk about that, Mark. So I guess the theme of the show is a building block. Would you consider Jamin Davis a building block moving forward?
I would say certainly going into next year, to move on from Davis and try to add another linebacker is just going to kind of add more needs to the list. So I would think Jamin Davis is good enough at the will, and if you're going to play, it depends on who the new coordinator is. If you're going to try to play a bunch of man coverage, then obviously, as we've seen, he's going to struggle. And maybe a new coach with some better technique work for him, or just connect better with him, maybe he does a little bit better at that. But I think most of the defense is set up to play zone. So if a new coordinator does look to play some of those zone or match concepts, then Davis will be a perfectly suitable will linebacker for most schemes. So I think Davis, he'll obviously be here next year, and I would expect him to be the starting will linebacker come week one, assuming he's healthy.
Yeah, and to that end, I just looked it up while you were talking. He's 25 years old, right? So we took the time. He was a raw prospect coming out of Kentucky. I believe he had like 14 or 15 games starting in college. So he wasn't really a refined product coming out into the NFL. Now he's starting to develop. Now he's starting to ascend. He's the kind of player that you want to keep because you feel like he's kind of moving on his upward trajectory and maybe hitting his prime moving forward. And we kind of talked about like defensive schemes all year long. Potentially, he might have a better scheme where they can use him more in that zone coverage and protection in regard to that. I guess last question on Davis, were you happy with the pick? And in a couple, it's reflecting on where he was in the draft and like in Christian Darrisaw, Jeremiah Wusu-Karamoa, were you happy with Davis? Are you happy where he is now? What are your thoughts on him?
I don't think you could be satisfied with the player that he has been for the 3 years he's been here when you've taken him 19th overall. When you take a guy that athletic, that high, you're obviously thinking he's going to be our guy that can match up with athletic tight ends and running backs and match up man to man. And we're playing him behind those 4 first-round picks on the defensive line, and we're going to keep him clean and stuff like that. And I think one of the biggest failings that they had was that they tried to make him play Mike linebacker, and
that's true.
That really set him back, and he really struggled to do that. And once they switched him back to the will spot, he looked a lot better in his second year, but still had some sort of hangover from his rookie year. And And this year we have seen a lot more progression from him, and he is a much more solid and consistent football player, and he's a much better run defender than he ever was in college or in his first few years. So he's certainly a serviceable player. He certainly has the potential to become a good starting NFL linebacker. But I'd be surprised if a new regime comes in and it picks up his 5th-year option. I think they would probably just say, no, just play out your last year of your contract, and if you earn a deal, then we'll talk a deal next year. But I would think this will be his final year of his contract. They won't pick up that option.
I think it's a wise decision too. We talked about it yesterday in the podcast with Adam and Doug. I believe it's $13.2 million he would be penned for that for a 5th-year option. I don't think he warrants that right now. I think it kind of 1 year, prove it contract. 1 year, prove what you can do to get a larger contract will probably be the way to go. So thank you for that.
Yep.
Real quick comments before we move on. What's up, Marcus? Says, hey, Family Nice podcast. What's up, bro? Good to see you. Marcus says, I think Sam Howell is a building block. We need tackle, center, and linebacker. We'll talk about that. Sam Howell's been in our conversation all year long, but that's a great segue because we're not talking about tackle or center, but we're talking about guard and Sam Cosmi. So throwing it over to you, Mark. What do you got, bro?
Yeah, so Cosmi is someone I wrote about last week on my Substack, and he going back and watching the film during this bye week, I had the opportunity to watch Cosmi just kind of focus on him rather than the general protection or Sam Howell and stuff like that. And actually Cosmi has stood out as someone that's played really well. One of his best traits, this kind of doesn't sound like an amazing trait, but one of his best traits is his awareness. And
you need that in guard. Yeah, I think so.
Well, this play kind of shows this is. I think I've shown this play on these shows before, but this play shows that level of awareness where the Cardinals are running this little sim pressure here, where this defensive tackle is the one over the outside shoulder of Cosmi, and that's who Cosmi thinks he's going to block. That there's this edge rusher here that they're accounting for with Wiley, and Cosmi's thinking he's blocking him. The center's blocking this nose tackle, and stuff's happening over here. And so Cosmi's thinking he's blocking this guy at the snap. However, this linebacker edge rusher guy drops off into coverage. His defensive tackle widens out to Wiley. This nose tackle comes inside, and then this linebacker replaces this edge rusher. So this linebacker joins the rush inside. And Washington gets kind of overloaded on this side because Leno is fanning out to this edge rusher who's also dropping off into coverage. And then the center and left guard are both occupied by the defensive tackles. So Cosmi, his assignment is this defensive tackle. So he could quite easily just work with Andrew Wiley on a double team here and take the rest of the play off and say that's that. He does not do that. What he does is we'll see this play progress. He gets his hand on him, but he sees that he's widening to Wiley, and he sees that Wiley's engaging in that block. So he immediately looks back inside. He thinks, okay, I know this guy's widening. There's got to be something else coming over here. And when he sees that his center and his left guard are engaged in blocks, he knows that they're not stunting. It's not a stunt coming this way. It's a linebacker blitzing between them. And again, this is not his responsibility at all. He does not need to be looking back this far across the field for this guy. But he spots him. And so he slides across. He does his best to slide across, and he's going across behind the center. So how often do you see a guard come across behind the center to pick up? And he gets a key chip on that linebacker, and Howell's able to step up and deliver that throw. I think I've got the other angle of that on this clip.
That was a great descriptor, great adjective. That's very good awareness right there. That's a very smart play by him as a third-year player now, second-year player is great.
Yeah, and in his first full year at guard, and I mean This was his first full-time start as the right guard. So because it was the first game of the season, and so that was something that stood out to me was his awareness, and that has shown up quite consistently. So this is a few weeks later. This is that Giants game where it was a bit of a disaster, but he is 7 weeks later, and he's showing an awareness and an understanding of the bigger picture. He obviously, having switched between tackle and guard, he understands that there's different responsibilities for each spot, and he'll have learned that there is a bigger picture than just trying to block the guy in front of you. And So here we have the Giants trying to do somewhat similar thing. They're trying to overload this right side of the line. The nose tackle is going to widen all the way out to the left tackle. They're going to have these two linebackers rush. This edge rusher is trying to rush. And then they've got this safety coming up and joining the rush as well. So they're going to have 5 all on this side of the line. And what Cosmi is going to do, as we'll run this through, he's going to take his initial guy. But while he does that, he kind of watches through his guy and spots the safety coming. And he doesn't know exactly if anyone over here is looking for that, whether they're sliding across to help pick that up. I think probably the running back should be working that way and thinking that way. And you can see he's kind of looking over there. But Cosmi isn't sure of that. So Cosmi picks up his guy and he kind of gets him stopped. He cuts off his initial move and the linebacker is trying to kind of spin back inside. And so Cosmi sees the opportunity to kind of get a 2-for-1 and pick up this guy as well. So Cosmi peels off. He still gets his outside hand on that linebacker, but he uses his other arm to pick up that safety and cuts him off and effectively gets 2-for-1. And unfortunately, despite the fact that he's picking up these two, these guys leave this guy going
3-on-1 and they get it comes through. It's crazy.
But that causes Howell to overthrow the ball, and that was an interception. That was dropped, so it wasn't actually an interception. But yeah, that just kind of showed that how Cosmi is really aware of the bigger picture, not just okay, this is the guy lined up across from me. I'm blocking him. I'm blocking him, but there's other guys that are coming, and I can help try to pick those up.
And good eye on that, Mark, because it was a negative play, but you found the positive within it with Sam Cosmi blocking. So good critique. Good job.
Yeah. And so when you have that awareness and you combine that with his athletic ability, you have a pretty nice prospect at guard. And this is just a couple of plays of stunts, I think, that I've got here where you see just how smooth he is athletically, and you can compare it with Chris Paul at times. Chris Paul left guard. I think this is City Charles. So this isn't Chris Paul.
Yeah,
Chris Paul.
Charles, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Paul is a much bigger body, but
he's more bulkier. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he doesn't move his feet quite so well. So when teams run stunts at him, he really struggles to pass the defensive tackle off to the outside and then redirect back inside to pick up that looping edge rusher. Whereas you'll see Sam Cosmi here. He does a really nice job engaging in his defensive tackle, passing him off, and then quickly redirecting back inside to pick up the looping defensive end. And we'll just see that here. And you can see he peels off real nicely, picks that up, gets it blocked cleanly, and Howe keeps this nice clean pocket, which he can step up into and deliver his throw. And unfortunately, McLaurin didn't make that catch. But this is the other variation of pretty much the same stunt. The last one we saw, the defensive tackle went first and the defensive end looped inside. This time it's going to be the reverse of that. So the defensive end is going to crash inside towards Cosmi, and then the tackle is going to step inside, pretending he's going to rush inside, and then loop out to the edge. So it's just the reverse of the stunt that we just saw. So it's a little bit of a different movement for Cosmi because he has to work inside with this defensive tackle first and then be alert to this defensive end crashing inside to him. But again, we can see he's such a smooth athlete. He's coming inside. You can see he's working inside with his defensive tackle. He maybe gets a call here from Andrew Wiley, or he might just see it himself and then feel like this rush is a bit light, so there must be something else coming. But just before this guy is able to impact him, you can see his head turns here. He sees that guy coming, and he's able to peel off the defensive tackle, prepare himself to brace for this impact, and picks up that guy and immediately gets his hands on his chest, which allows Wiley to peel off quicker and pick up that stunting defensive tackle. And that keeps that side of the pocket nice and clean. And Howe was able to deliver that nice ball to Terry McLaurin.
So this is great tape, right? So coming out of so Dane Brugler, I love him. I think he's a great analyst for The Athletic. He loves Sam Cosmi. I think he had him as like maybe the second or third highest right tackle coming out of the draft, coming from Texas. And he was known for being like a run mauler. He was known for being aggressive, kind of having short arms. But like I think him like in a telephone booth, like being at a guard, I think kind of suits his strengths pretty well. And I think he could potentially be a solid guard moving forward. So I'm really happy with him so far.
Yeah, he's he really has impressed me this season. And yeah, you're right. He came out as this incredibly athletic tackle. Like his athletic traits were not too dissimilar from a number standpoint to someone like Trent Williams, which tells you just how good of an athlete he
Yeah, he's a
could have
RAS
been,
score.
or he is.
Mhm.
Yeah. So obviously that's not to say he's anywhere near Trent Williams' level as a football player, but just
Yeah.
as an athlete. And so the issues that he had was his technique, and he often bent from the waist rather than from the knees, which meant he would kind of lose balance falling forward, and guys on the edge would take advantage of that. Playing at guard, that's not quite as big an issue, and he has improved that technique as well. So it kind of he's improved, as well as moving inside has helped kind of cover it as well. So
Mhm.
he's doing a lot better, and inside at guard, he's able to show off the handwork that he has, and this is one example where he kind of pulls this linebacker that's joining this rush off balance. He catches him trying to extend his arm, and he does a nice little chop to or rip to pull this guy's arm down and pull him off balance. So you'll see him come in here. He tries to, you can see he's trying to extend this arm out, but he's doing it kind of lazily, and Cosme catches him extending that right arm out. And so you can see he gets his hand on the guy's elbow, he rips down and pulls him off
Oof,
balance, and
love
that
it.
knocks him down. And then Cosme's able to obviously fall on top of him. And this is the play where Howell
Finishes
scrambled
them
for a
too. I
first
love it.
down. Yeah, he finished him nicely as well. And that's the nice kind of the nasty streak of an offensive
Yeah.
lineman that you like to see from him. So yeah,
You have
I
plenty of
think that
film. You have plenty of good film on him. This is great. I guess
I
my
do.
question to you, I guess you
Yeah.
like it. That's awesome. So walking away from it, so you seem to like Sam Cosme, and obviously this is a highlight kind of bringing him up. Are there many glaring faults or anything you're worried about Sam Cosme from what you've watched so far?
Yeah, it's more in the run game, and that's what these clips are going to come on to.
Okay.
He's a really good athlete, as we talked about, and when they run zone scheme stuff, he's fantastic.
Mhm.
As this play will show, it's when there's talk of different coordinators or different head coach candidates, and what kind of schemes they might run, and someone like a Ben Johnson with the Lions runs a lot more gap scheme stuff, whereas someone like, just an example, Bobby Slowick with the Texans comes from that Shanahan tree, which is a lot more based on the zone scheme. And so when you're looking at a core foundational piece for the next team going forward, you wonder, does Cosme fit on a more gap scheme team compared to how well he fits on his own stuff? And I've got some clips on that. So
Let's do it.
we'll first look at just showing just how athletic he is as a lineman, and this is a wide zone run to the left here against the Giants, and Cosme has kind of a tough job. He's the guard here on the back side of this run, so his job is to try to work up to the Mike linebacker and cut him off on the back side of the run, and that's a really tough job for any lineman, because in theory this linebacker should be probably 50-ish pounds lighter than him, if not more.
Yeah.
And they should be able to
Quicker.
diagnose that run and quickly get out there. But Cosme does a really nice job. You'll see here, he launches up to that second level, immediately gets to that outside shoulder. The linebacker makes a bit of a mistake looking on that back shoulder, and that allows Cosme to get to that play side and see them off on the back side of that run. And that allows Brian Robinson to easily run. This is where that linebacker should have been hitting that hole right here, but Cosme's caught him up back here,
Great play.
and that allows Robinson to get the edge and turn up the field for a nice big gain. So from a zone standpoint, I have no issues with Cosme. I think if any team that comes in, if you get a Shanahan disciple that wants to run a bunch of zone, I
He's
think Sam
athletic.
Cosme would be a fantastic guard for that. I think the question then comes, what about if you want to run more gap scheme stuff? And there are plays where Cosme is really good with gap scheme stuff, as we'll see on this one, and there's plays where he has a few issues still technically.
Mhm.
So this one is a little gap scheme. They've got a double team block here with Andrew Wiley on this defensive tackle, and they're working up to the Mike linebacker again. And Cosme's the one that will stay on this defensive tackle, and you'll see that he does a really nice job. Both him and Wiley do a nice job stepping together, closing this gap so this defender can't penetrate it. And then Cosme just kind of takes over and drives the guy backwards. And so they get that gap closed nice and quickly. They take on this defensive tackle. he kind of tries to shoot this inside. So Cosmi takes over the block, which means Wiley's going to work more up to this linebacker. And so Cosmi takes over, and he notices this guy is off balance. And so Cosmi just drives him, and he drives him all the way back. And he drives him all the way back here. And unfortunately, Brian Robinson fumbles the ball inside on this play, but you can see Cosmi, again, doing that kind of nasty streak thing where he drives that lineman all the way back, sort of 10 yards off the ball. So there is potential for him as a gap scheme guy. He obviously has some power, and he can work those combination blocks. He has some nice feet that help him cut off those gaps and work those combination blocks. The only real issue I have with him is when he pulls, which is an odd one because he's a really good
it's kind of counterintuitive, right? You'd assume he'd be pretty good at this.
Exactly. And the thing is, he does everything up into the block really well. Because as we've said, he's a really good athlete. He pulls around nicely to this linebacker. It's once he gets to the linebacker that he has an issue. And this kind of showed up consistently when I saw him pulling. And it's why Washington tend to, when they pull, they tend to pull the left guard to the right side rather than Cosmi around the other way. Cosmi does a really nice job clearing all this traffic down here. He turns his hips and gets squared up to this guy. The issue is that once he gets close to him, he kind of just stops rather than, using all that momentum he's just gained from pulling and just running this guy over. Like, this guy should be easy for Cosmi to run over.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
He kind of stops his feet here, and that allows this linebacker to just kind of juke him and beat him outside, and that causes Cosmi, because he stops his feet, he then kind of lunges at him, and that makes it easy for the linebacker to kind of shed him. And you can see Cosmi loses his balance and ends up not blocking him. On this play, it didn't really matter because the tackle had been made behind him, but that's kind of a thing that showed up consistently. So, and that's more of a technical issue. That's something that you, in theory, a good gap scheme offensive line coach would be able to figure out, but it's something that they would have to figure out because it's something that shows up pretty consistently.
So, Mark, let's get a shout out to our boy Deuce. He said, let's go back to the I formation and H-back formation to please the fan base. That's the only way we can run the ball, apparently. So, obviously, Deuce is being sarcastic. Thank you for watching, Deuce. I appreciate it, bro. So awesome. It's good seeing Sam Cosmi out there. It's kind of easy this time of the year to be a little bit it's been a tough year for all of us, kind of watching the Commanders and kind of seeing them struggle. But I do like this whole building block episode. Are we transitioning to Percy Butler now? Is where we're going?
That's the next clip. Yeah.
So before we go there, Mark, if you don't mind me interrupting you, I'm going to kind of summarize the learning at every player. So Sam Cosmi, no brainer, building block moving forward. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree. He really. I was unsure of how well he would transition to guard, but he's really impressed me this year. And gone back and watched the film on him, and as I saw, I kind of packed in quite a few plays there, showing how good he's been, and the awareness and pass protection has been great, especially on an offensive line that has struggled with picking up lots of blitzes and stunts and stuff. So he's been one of the few guys that's done it. And then in the run game, as I say, the only real issue I have with him is when he pulls, which is an odd thing because he's athletic enough to do it. He just kind of stops his feet every time he gets close. But the rest of the time, like when he's down blocking as a combination block, he provides plenty of power, as we saw. And in zone schemes, he's fantastic. He gets so much movement on the front side, and then when he's on the back side, he can climb and reach guys. So I really like Sam Cosmi, and I think he's definitely the right guard of the future for them.
Yeah, I think with a better coaching as well. I think he just maybe may not be fully confident in his abilities, because I feel like when you're in open space against a linebacker or a cornerback or safety, you kind of assume that they're quicker than him. So breaking down so you can have a better block on that defensive back. But trust yourself, kind of plow them. If you get half your weight on that guy, he's flying. So get the momentum behind it. So I like that right there. So you're right.
Exactly.
All right, Percy Butler, let's get into it.
Yeah, so Percy Butler's had an interesting year. Obviously, when they started out the year, Derek Forrest was the starting free safety. Cam Curl was the strong safety, but Curl would quite often rotate down either into the kind of nickel spot or as a dime linebacker. And Percy Butler would be the third guy that would come on the field and play as part of a 2-deep look with Forrest. And he's had quite a few ups and downs, and we're starting with the downs. So we were quite positive on Cosme. We're going to have to start negatively on Butler.
Balance. It's balance. It's all good. No worries.
Yeah. So this is one of those DJ Moore's touchdowns against them from the Bears game in week 5, and Percy Butler is this safety here. He's responsible for this deep half. They're playing a basic tempo 2 scheme, so he's responsible for this deep half. And what the Bears run is they have a tight end running up the seam, and then they have a little slot fade combination with the outside receiver running a hitch to just occupy Kendall Fuller in the flat, and then you have the slot receiver, which is DJ Moore. He's running the slot fade, so he's running basically a go route, but he's fading it towards the sideline into this space behind Fuller, who's going to be occupied.
It's a dime too. If I remember this play, it's a great throw, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. But Percy Butler doesn't play it particularly well. Your safety in a tempo 2 system, you want them to be widening out and being around these numbers, on top of the numbers, and you'll see Forrest on the other side of the field. He gets that width. Percy Butler keeps this quite close into the hash marks, and I think he's worried about this tight end running up the seam, but that's not his responsibility. That's what this Mike linebacker is running with. So the Mike linebackers need to be responsible for this, and that should widen Percy Butler. But I'll run this on now, and you'll see that Butler gets. You can see his eyes immediately go inside rather than out to this slot receiver, and he's worried about this up the seam where Cody Barton's got that covered. That's Cody Barton's responsibility. He's got it covered. He's on top of it. Butler should be out here by the numbers, and you can see on this other side of the field, Derek Forrest is on top of the numbers, whereas Butler is in between the numbers and the hash marks. And
Mark, you and I study tape, and unfortunately we watched this tape, this actual clip several times over the past couple of weeks. Once his back's turned, it's over. In the NFL, that's all it is, right? It's him having that kind of facing that direction, kind of having your back towards the wide receiver. It's such a fast game, he can't turn around quick enough to kind of cover that. So it's game over. Just the field sees it and unleashes it right there. It's a perfect throw.
Yeah, and some guys are quick enough to recover from, having their body turned one way and flip their hips. And Percy Butler's not like a bad athlete at all, but the biggest issue is that he's not got anywhere near enough width. And that kind of narrows his vision inside. So he doesn't even see this. As you say, his back's turned. He has no idea that this is happening down here. Some people might have thought that this was Kendall Fuller's responsibility, but he's the flat defender. So he's got to cover this guy in the flat. And he tries to get back when he sees what's happening here. He's a smart player. He's looking inside, and he can see that Percy Butler isn't where he should be. And again, all you have to do is look at this other side of the field where Forrest is on top of those numbers. And so Percy Butler shouldn't be worrying about him. He should be worrying about Moore, and Moore gets outside. I had it drawn up there, and he's far too late to recognize, actually, I need to be getting back outside. And Butler is only now, the ball's being delivered, and he's way inside. He should be out here on top of this, and this shouldn't even really be able to be thrown. And again, you can see the difference here. They're running the same thing on this side of the field. Derek Forrest is on top of that route, and if that ball's trying to be thrown in there, Forrest is ready to break that up, whereas Percy Butler's got a much bigger gap, and he doesn't get over there in time.
Great play, though, for them. But for them, for the Bears.
Very nice. Very nice throw.
Question for you, though. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. We have a couple people we're highlighting: Jamin Davis, Sam Cosmi, Percy Butler. You mentioned Kendall Fuller. He's a free agent. He's a smart player. He's at the end of his contract. Is he a building block moving forward? Would you consider keeping him, or would you move ahead and pick someone else?
It would all depend on A, the scheme that the new defensive coordinator is going to have, and B, the price.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
If you're going to run zone stuff or match stuff, Kendall Fuller is a fantastic zone match corner, and he's a very reliable veteran at this point in his career. So I'd have zero issues with them bringing him back if they're going to run that kind of system. If they want to move to more of a man-based scheme or whatever, then that doesn't necessarily fit him. And maybe Kendall Fuller will be looking at going to more of a contending team than a rebuilding one.
That's true.
So maybe he wouldn't be open to coming back to Washington, but there's a lot of factors in that. But certainly, if they're going to play zone, I'd be absolutely on board with bringing back Kendall Fuller and keeping a reliable veteran in that backfield, because they don't really have any other vets back there. Everyone else is on a rookie contract. So
absolutely. Good call.
Yeah. So this one was a few weeks ago against the Cowboys, and this is Percy Butler. This time he's playing single high safety, and we've got St. Juice in the slot here against Brandon Cooks. And this is a really nice route from Cooks. He releases inside, bends that route back outside before sharply cutting across the face. But Butler plays this really poorly. He should be staying, at most, he should be staying on these hash marks. He maybe even wants to cheat a little bit more inside. But as soon as Cooks kind of bends this route outside, Butler gets way too far outside, and that opens up that middle of the field. So we'll let that run through their little motion here and ID man coverage. And then you can see Butler already is opened his hips and turning to run towards the sideline rather than keeping his spot in the middle of the field. And obviously, Cooks is a really good deep threat. He's been a really good deep threat in the league for a long time. So you want to stay on top of him, but he kind of goes overboard by opening his hips and being kind of angling himself outside immediately. And Cooks, he does begin to angle back out there, but then cuts it back inside. And you can see he's already outside these hash marks, and Butler really should be here. And then Cooks can't just cut this back across his face. And then, just look where that's his foot cutting down inside, and you can see Percy Butler, his whole body is facing out over the sort of the numbers here rather than back inside. So he tries his best to turn around and get back inside, but because he's left the middle of the field so open, Dak's able to lead Cooks away from him, and it's a pretty easy touchdown for the Cowboys.
What would you say Percy Butler's big deficit is? Because I believe, I'm just off the top of my head, I believe he came from Iowa State. And I believe he was a height, weight, speed kind of guy. I thought he was like a pretty fast, quick, pretty low. I think he's pretty tall too, like 6'2", 6'3". I can look that up while you're doing your, going in your next clip. Would you say that his deficit is physical and he's not keeping up with the wide receivers, or more mental and he's out of position? Like, I guess my takeaway so far is that it's mental. I feel like he's not preparing before the play, getting out of position and having to recover, and that's why he's getting beat. That's what I'm seeing. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, that's 100% right. He's a fantastic athlete. And in college, he played a lot of two deep coverages and a lot of quarters stuff. And when they play quarters, he tends to be quite good at that. But when he's not playing quarters, as we've seen kind of with Tampa 2, he's loses a little bit of discipline and gets kind of too attached inside sometimes. And as we just saw when he's playing single high, he's not been reliable enough in the middle of the field to hold his position and not bite on the first kind of move and try to get over the top of it. He should be holding his position a little bit more and not worrying about getting outside quite so much. He's got the athleticism to stay on top of guys like Brandon Cooks. He just needs to trust that he does and not leave his position too early, which is something that can be corrected, but it just needs, correcting.
Speaking of being correcting, I'm going to correct myself. So he's actually from Louisiana, and he's 6'1", but he ran a 4.36 40. So he is pretty damn quick. So he has the athletic ability to do so. And his RAS score for the 20-yard split was 9.94. So he's pretty agile, but I guess, the mental part of the game is kind of aligning ahead of time. So I got that. Yep. And real quick, I also want to give a shout out to Deuce again in the chat. He says, hopefully Kendall Fuller wants to come back. He has a ring already. He is a local guy as well. He came from Virginia Tech. Maybe he does want to stay local. So hopefully, hopefully that works out.
Yeah. And as I say, if Kendall Fuller wants to come back and the system that they're going to play suits him, I'd absolutely have him back in a heartbeat because he's a very good player. And I think he's pretty underrated by a lot of fans, I think. But
I think so.
He does his job pretty well. But yeah, the other aspects, the kind of biggest negative aspect of Butler's play this year has been his tackling, especially as the last line of defense. We see a couple back-to-back plays here, and it happened in back-to-back weeks where they gave up 64-yard touchdowns, and on both of them, Butler did a bad job. So, and to be clear, it's not his error that gets this running back free here. They have a cross dog stunt that doesn't quite hit right. John
remember this play
his gap right.
Yep.
But Butler is the last line of defense, so he needs to make the play. And when that little stunt up front doesn't hit, there's a clear lane here, and Butler needs to come up and what Ron Rivera's been saying, put a cap on things. And he takes a bad angle. The running back is able to kind of adjust his path back outside, and then Butler misses that tackle, and it's off to the races, and it's a 64-yard touchdown. And
And that's a difficult play. You basically have a one-on-one open space, huge hole running back coming at you, but it also separates the average player from the above average player and someone you want to have as a potential starter. Like if you are a solid starter, above average player, you can make that open tackle, at least bring them down a couple yards on the field, completely whiffing. It happens, but you don't want to see that happen very often. So it's a tough play by him.
Exactly. It's not an easy play by any means, but it's one that you need your safety to make. It's one that you need. That the whole point of the safety position is if a bad play happens, they don't turn it into a horrific one. If he makes that tackle for a 20-yard run, then obviously it's not great that it's a 20-yard run, but it's not a 64-yard touchdown.
Exactly right.
And this is the one from the Seahawks where he's again playing a Tampa 2 coverage. He's this safety back here, and they end up covering all the routes well, and it's checked down to the running back, and Danny Johnson in the slot slips and misses his tackle, but then Percy Butler comes down from deep and then also misses his. So
I remember this play too.
Yeah, Butler again isn't the one most at fault here. Well, he's still at fault here, but there's other players at fault. Danny Johnson again should be breaking down on this and making this tackle. Everything's gone well. All the routes are well covered. Butler's doing his job again. He's on the numbers, so he's got his width this time from earlier in the year where he didn't win that Tampa 2 scheme, but and he's on top of that route, so he's doing his job fine here. But this ball gets checked down to the running back, and Danny Johnson slips as he goes to. You can see he just slips there, and that gives that running back that bit of burst to get by him. But even from here, Percy Butler again needs to be putting a cap on this, that tight end did a really nice job coming off and getting this corner, but Percy Butler needs to be making this play, and he dives at his feet and misses the tackle, and I think it's Walker gets up the sideline again.
Yeah, Kenneth Walker up the field. It's a tough play. Yeah, but you got to do better than that. I guess one thing, we're kind of talking about it, and we're seeing a lot of negative plays from Percy Butler, so maybe this whole building block thing will be in the back of our mind there. My comment to you, though, it's kind of hard. Out of sight, out of mind. I know I'm throwing you some curveballs here. Like, do you think the safety position is a huge area of need moving forward? Because we do have Percy Butler, and Derek Forrest played pretty well last year, but he's been gone for, he's gone all season. We haven't really seen too much from him. And was that 1 year an aberration, or is he going to be a good player? Like, how far on your scale, how much of a concern is safety for you, Mark, right now?
A lot depends on Cam Curl for me.
Okay.
Because obviously he's a free agent. If he leaves, if they don't re-sign him, then I think they need a safety. I wouldn't feel great about Forrest and Butler being my starting safeties. I think they're both two safeties with a fair bit of potential that can be football players in this league, that can be regular starters, but neither of them I think are there yet in terms of being those guys you want to build your defense around. So that you can get by with one of those guys. Like Forrest, they were getting by with him at free safety. He made some nice plays, but with Cam Curl at strong safety, and in last year they had Bob McCain as their third safety, and then so they had two reliable vets like that next to him. He was kind of shielded a little bit, whereas this year Percy Butler's kind of not had that shield. Well, I'll get onto that. He's had a little bit of shielding, but if Cam Curl's there, then I feel fine about Forrest, Curl, and Butler as your three. If Cam Curl's not there, then I think safety becomes a much bigger need, and obviously they've got a lot of needs this offseason with how many guys are free agents, but I think safety climbs that list significant amount if Cam Curl's not back.
Gotcha.
So on Butler, it's been an interesting thing as we've seen kind of the issues with him playing deep and not playing his technique properly. Sorry, I got a cat trying to climb on the there you go.
Grinding film. It's all good.
So with him kind of struggling with deep coverages and failing to hold his position properly, the last few weeks what they've done is they've had Cam Curl play more of they play left and right rather than strong and free more often than not, but they've had Cam Curl play more of the free safety type of plays where he's the one, if they rotate back to single high, Cam Curl's been doing that, which is why we haven't seen Cam Curl's name come across the screen quite so often in the last few weeks, because he's been further back and not as involved.
And that's kind of sad. I don't know if you agree with me, Mark, but I feel like Cam Curl's strength is kind of hovering around the line of scrimmage and being run defense. Like I feel like because of the deficits, because of what we've been seeing, they kind of are using him to be like, as a band-aid to cover up an issue, but they're taking away from his strengths, which is kind of sad in my opinion. I don't know if you agree with that at all.
No, I agree with you. You'd much rather him be closer to the line of scrimmage, but
Yeah.
it kind of speaks to his versatility again.
That's
and
true.
again, using,
That's true.
as you say, being a band-aid to cover up for other players' mistakes. And because Percy Butler had struggled deep, Cam Curl's switched back there, and Percy Butler's come up closer to the line of scrimmage. And actually, from watching more of Percy Butler this year, this is stuff that he has done a little bit better. And you see a little bit more of a potential of him when he's coming into the box and playing a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. And this is one where it's just a jet sweep with I think this is a slot receiver taking this jet sweep across, and Percy Butler is down, coming down a little bit more towards the box. He's still back deep, but he's coming down a little bit more, and he runs this down nicely and makes a nice play, as we'll see here. The rest of the defense is all biting on this fake, and St. Just gets clipped inside by the tight end. And Butler does a nice job making this play, and it's not necessarily the most convincing tackle as we've seen, but he got the job done this time.
Got him on the ground, yeah.
So that kind of triggered me to go back and look at him in the box and playing a little bit more coverage down at the line of scrimmage, and when he's actually matched up with tight ends and stuff, he's actually quite good. And this is back in week 1, where he's matching Zach Ertz is running what's called a little stick nod, where he fakes that little stick route and then nods back inside. And this is a tough route to cover, especially for a young safety like Butler. And Butler's even looking out here, being like, what's exactly the goal? Who am I covering? What are we doing? But even as the ball snapped, he's doing that. But then he just kind of goes into, I'm playing ball. And he sees that little angle outside, so he bites a little bit heavily on that. And Ertz is able to cut back inside of him. But what Butler does really nicely is he keeps his hand on him. He turns nicely. He gets himself on that back hip. So he's in a position to undercut any throw. And that's exactly what he does. And he undercuts that throw. That throw's a little bit late. He undercuts it and actually drops what should have been an interception, really. But it shows that there is some potential there as a guy that can kind of match up with tight ends and do a little bit more of the underneath coverage stuff than playing deep. And this is one more example. I'll then throw it over to you a little bit, but he's starting here as the free safety, but this is actually disguised. I think it's meant to be disguised Tampa 2, where Quan Martin and Benjamin St. Just end up playing the deep halves, and I think Butler's meant to be playing the hole, but it's a little bit confusing because Cam Curl kind of also plays that role, and so it's a little bit confusing exactly what the coverage is. But ends up what happening is Butler, rather than being the single high safety, he steps up and he spots this crossing route from, I think it's Hunter Henry, the tight end from the Patriots, and he does a really nice job cutting it from deep, and you'll see he undercuts the route. You can see St. Just and Martin are splitting to the deep halves, and it kind of looks to me like a Tampa 2, but Curl kind of makes it. I don't know whether Curl I feel like Curl probably should be a little bit more over here, but maybe he's meant to be the whole player, and Butler's meant to be stepping up and replacing him there, and that's part of the disguise. I don't know exactly, but what you see here is that Butler spots Hunter Henry running this crossing route, and he spots that being a threat. So he starts driving down on it early before the quarterback's even looking that way, and the quarterback comes back to it and thinks, "Oh, I've got him in 5 yards of space," but Percy Butler's already on his bike and driving down on that. So that ball comes out, and again Butler undercuts the route and gets his hand in at the catch point, breaks it up, and it's incomplete. And I've got the end zone angle of that one to show. He gets underneath that, breaks it up, and it's a nice play. So. And then on to Brian Robinson if we have time, but I don't know if we have time. But
we're definitely going to make some time for Brian Robinson. I want to hear about Brian. I like Brian Robinson a lot. So for one, what I was trying to say was, I think Percy Butler has an athletic advantage against tight ends. So I think like him on Zach Ertz is actually an advantage to him. So I wouldn't mind seeing that more. So I'm glad you kind of put him against, Zach Ertz and Hunter Henry back to back. Kind of saw that advantage there. I also want to give some shout outs. There's some special viewers from the UK kind of dialing into our show. So I love it. Andy's on here. So what's up? D said, Deuce, my man, what's going on? Andy says, Cam is an important piece, probably the only guy I'd be happy with us re-signing from our free agent, our defense. My other guy from the UK, Scott's like George and Mark. Can't think of two better people to break this all down. I see my co-host is in here too. Gives a little wink. Scott gives a shout out to Deuce as well. I'm glad you guys are watching the show. Definitely a little watch party here. Happy to see it. Mark, before we kind of pivot, we are definitely making time for Brian Robinson. We'll spend about 5 minutes on him because I definitely I'm really happy with his growth this year. But like I said, we're going to summarize every player. Percy Butler, is he a building block moving forward? How do you feel about him?
So I think if you're penciling him in as a free safety, which has kind of been what he was when Derek Forrest went down, I would say no. He's kind of struggled as we saw with those deep coverages. He's not quite getting his angles and his technique right, and he was failing to make those tackles that a free safety needs to make to stop a bad play turning into a horrific one.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you watch him back and you see him in other situations where he's a bit closer to the line of scrimmage and more of a strong safety where he's matching up with tight ends and playing some run stuff and what have you, he actually does that quite nicely. So there is a bit of potential there if you maybe flip him to the strong safety spot. And obviously that's Cam Curl's job. And if Cam Curl's re-signed, that will remain Cam Curl's job. But as we've seen with this team for the last few years, there's room for a third safety, and you can play three safety coverages and stuff like that. So I think if you transition more towards that side of the ball and have him play a little bit more strong safety stuff than free, then I think there is a talented player there, and obviously there's a fantastic athlete, as you said there. So I'm not ready to give up on Percy Butler, but
there's some areas of growth.
Yeah, there's some caveats with that of exactly the kind of role that I think that's probably changed from when they initially drafted.
Gotcha. Andy said, always a good listen, guys. Thank you, Andy, for listening. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for chiming in. It makes the show more fun. So thank you for dialing in. I appreciate it. Let's do this, man. Mark, I want to talk about Brian Robinson. Let's kind of aim to end around 105. Let's spend 7 minutes on B-Rob. Let's see how it goes.
Right. Okay. We'll burst through a couple plays real quick then. This was just kind of a highlight reel for me. Brian Robinson. It's fun to watch him run.
That's what I want to see.
And so obviously Brian Robinson coming out of Alabama, they did a lot of gap scheme stuff. And if we're looking forward ahead again, like we talked about with Cosmi, certain coaches might prefer gap scheme, certain coaches might prefer zone. And Brian Robinson is a really good gap scheme runner. And we'll see here, this is a power scheme where you've got Cosmi and Wiley double teaming the defensive tackle to the linebacker. And you've got, I think this is Chris Paul this time. He's pulling around and he's picking up this linebacker. And so as we run this on, we'll see it's a nice little tendency breaker, because when one of the biggest gripes everyone has about shotgun runs is that it kind of tells the defense that is always going to be going to the opposite side of the running back. But this is something you'll see that they do quite a lot, where they have him delay the handoff and continue it to the same side. So this is the same side power run, and kind of delays it and ends up getting it. And you see that this kind of works out quite nicely. They get a real nice double team here with Cosmi and Wiley driving that defensive tackle back into that linebacker. Chris Paul does a really nice job, and he doesn't do the thing we saw with Cosmi where he stops his feet. He just uses his weight and runs into this guy and stands him up. And so it'd be real tempting, I think, for Brian Robinson to see this large gap between these guys and think, I'm just going to bounce this outside. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't do that. He waits patiently. He knows that this is meant to be hitting inside, and he can see that Cosmi and Wiley have done a really nice job getting movement on this defensive tackle.
Two guys too.
And Wiley's picking up that linebacker. So he knows that gap is going to be there, assuming Wiley can pick up that linebacker, which he does. So he waits patiently, and if he had tried to bounce it, obviously he would have then ended up running into that player. But Paul does a nice job walling him off, and Brian Robinson's able to get there. And again, these guys do a fantastic job with those two defenders, driving them back and still pushing them backwards.
Great blocking,
giving,
for sure.
Exactly. And Robinson does a nice job turning this corner and bouncing this run outside, and then using his speed and getting away from guys. So fantastic run. And this is another one, again, same side power. So that idea that the running back is always going to be running away from him when it's in the shotgun is not true, especially in this offense. They do a lot of this. And we'll just run it through here again, that little delayed handoff. This doesn't quite work out nicely. John Bates struggles with his block, and Chris Paul ends up having to block John Bates guy instead of his own linebacker, and so they kind of get a little bit messed up over here. And you can see that linebacker ends up getting the edge and becoming the new edge defender. And so Robinson can kind of see that this is an issue. Bates is obviously on the floor. This linebacker is unblocked, and this is going to be an issue if he continues this out here. However, these guys have got this sealed off inside, and Tyler Larson's done just enough to kind of hold off Lawrence, and Lawrence has been trying to penetrate. So this creates a little gap between Larson and Cosmi. So Brian Robinson does a real nice job of seeing, okay, this linebacker is going to make this play, or I'm going to have to run through this linebacker. But actually, there's a space over here, so I can cut this run back. And this is the freedom that gap scheme gives running backs, that you don't want to be having to cut this back. Obviously, you want the blocks to work out nicely, but he has the freedom to cut this back. And he makes a couple of nice cuts here. He gets all the defenders all on the backside of the run now. And he has just one defender to beat. And maybe you could argue you'd like him to just plant his foot and go up the field. But he likes making these explosive jump cuts. And this is why, because he can make a guy miss like that.
He's quicker than you think. He's quicker than you think, because he's a big body, so you kind of think he's more of like a hulking kind of running back, but he does have some explosiveness to him, which is awesome. Love watching it.
He really does, and that's something that has stood out this year. Is he's got that explosiveness back. In college he had that explosive jump cut, and then obviously last year with the shooting incident he didn't quite have it, but this year he's got it back, and obviously he's got that power to finish those runs.
Mm-hmm.
I'll run this one through because it's just a nice run. He again makes some nice cuts and makes some guys miss. But the one more that I want to talk about just before we wrap this up is zone scheme stuff, because I said he's a guy that suits gap scheme stuff a lot more, and that is still true. But he has developed as a zone runner, and what we've seen from him this year, especially lately, but this was early on in the season. He's been a lot more patient in pressing that hole to the edge and waiting for the blocks to develop and then making that cut. And that's the important part of the zone scheme, is you want to be patient. You want to press the run to the front side of it as much as you can, get those defenders to commit to the edge, and then cut back behind them. And that's when you get the big runs. And you'll see that here. They have a little jet sweep action. Robinson takes that carry, and you might immediately be thinking, okay, there's a lane here, let's cut that back immediately. But that's too early to cut this run back. There's still plenty of time for him to press this lane and get these guys to overcommit. And the main thing here is he wants to get this defensive tackle to commit one way or the other, because he's kind of got Sadiq Charles stacked up, so he can play either side of him. So by pressing this a little bit more and pressing it a little bit further, he gets this defensive tackle to forces him to commit, and then the defensive tackle kind of stands up Charles and he commits inside, and that gives him this little cutback. And by waiting that little extra time rather than cutting back 2 or 3 steps earlier, by getting to that yard line there and forcing these guys to commit to their gaps, these blockers have now been able to seal the backside defenders off on the backside, and you can see there's that lane emerging for him, that little cutback right there, and that's where he hits it. He does a nice job dodging this tackle diving at his feet, getting through that hole. And now he's into the open field and bounces off a few more tackles and does his thing after the run and turns it into a nice run. But that was the big thing I wanted to focus on, is that he's done a lot better job. And I'll let it run through while we keep talking, because there's
I'll just say we can do 1 or 2 more plays, because I threw out 105 as a potential. But okay, what I'm seeing from Brian Robinson is he's patient. He's waiting for the holes in the to open up. He has a great jump step, and he does kind of explode. And I like how he actually will make 1 or 2 people miss in the open field, which wasn't his MO. When he gets past the offensive line, he does miss, makes a linebacker miss, or kind of creates something else, and kind of makes a bigger play than was expected. And I think kind of coming out of Alabama, his MO was he couldn't catch the ball, and he was kind of a 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of running back. But I'm not seeing that this year. I kind of see more of a dynamic running back. He had a great year altogether, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's he's become more well-rounded this year. He's really developed as a zone runner, and that to me is a really encouraging thing when we talk about a building block, is that he's not a guy that fits just one scheme or the other. He's someone that, because he's developing as a zone runner, he's someone that if you have someone coming in as a primarily zone scheme guy, like a Kyle Shanahan descendant, then he can fit that. He can do that.
I can see that.
We can see that here. We've got a nice another wide zone run with the tight end sifting back to cut off this backside. And again, he's pressing this as much as he can. This gets quite muddy, this read here, with a bit of, it's not necessarily penetration because they're still in front of the guys, but they don't get pushed back. They don't get moved.
Yeah.
So
nothing created, nothing generated there. Yeah.
Exactly. So he does a nice job pressing it as late as he possibly can. He's right on the heels of these offensive linemen. And that, again, forces these guys all to commit to that play side. And that creates this little cutback lane for him, which, again, he does a nice job making that sharp cut, and he's in the open field. And, as you said, sometimes he can make defenders miss. Sometimes I'd like him to just go and run that guy over because he can.
Might as well use it. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, he still does at the end of it. He still tries to run through this guy, but I prefer him to go run the safety over rather than trying to make one guy miss and attacking another and what have you. So that was the main stuff. And then again, this is another zone run. This is an inside zone run. Inside zone, again, you're looking to hit more inside rather than take it all the way outside. But this is a run where on inside zone, you look to cut it back more frequently than you do hit this front side. And the Broncos have a little run blitz on here. And so while we've seen him be more patient, he's not waiting too long on it. He's got the right mix of being more patient, but also understanding reading the play. And so obviously some guys would just hit this right up this gap here, but he sees this safety coming. And so he again squares it up, stays a little bit more patient, forces that safety to commit inside, and then cuts that back all the way.
Great play.
And then does a nice job running this all the way into the end zone for the touchdown. So I think I had some Robinson catch stuff, but that'll probably take another 10 minutes to talk about. If you want to
do one, or do you want to shovel for our next show? It's whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter.
We'll skip. Well, we've done this one before anyway. This was just him making a nice catch, showing that he has good hands catching that ball behind himself. So we'll skip through that. This is the kind of stuff that is really encouraging as a pass catcher, where typically you'd have Antonio Gibson, or more recently they've had Curtis Samuel lined up here doing this kind of thing. But I believe this is a little choice route. It could be what they call a Texas route, where you angle out here and break inside. But the way he stems it is more of a choice. He rounds it up a little bit more. And so that would suggest that he has obviously the choice of breaking inside, breaking outside, or sitting down, depending on how the defender reacts. And this is a type of route you need a guy that is explosive. As we talked about, Robinson can make that explosive jump cut. It's just not something you expect to see a guy that's 6'2", 230 pounds or whatever he is, to be able to do. And so he gets this linebacker squared up nicely, plants that foot and cuts inside the way we used to see. Well, not let's not go overboard. It's not the same way Jordan Reed used to do it, but it's still
not a basketball cut. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It still gets this linebacker kind of, well, obviously completely missing where he's going, and he's wide open over the middle, and that's where, once Robinson's got the ball in his hands, you want him running at defenders with a full head of steam, and
you don't want to tackle that. Exactly right. That's a big play.
Exactly.
Running down.
And then I'll just let this last one run because it's the screen on the Falcons. There's nothing hugely amazing about the analysis here. He just runs over the safety at the end, just to
gorgeous play. Outrageous. He got penalized for that. That's what football's all about. You're supposed to finish a run. That's an angry run right there. I love it. That's a great clip to end our video session on too. That's fantastic. I love it, Mark. Great. I guess we're gonna be honest, keep it going. I guess, is he a building block moving forward? I think it's a no-brainer, right? What are you thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Chris Rodriguez, we didn't get to, and maybe we will in the future, and he's someone that has shown some potential as well. But I think Brian Robinson is very firmly running back one, and has some real nice potential, and is developing in a lot of different aspects that makes him quite scheme diverse and being more open even in the passing game to getting more balls that way. And he's kind of proving this year that he's someone that you want him to get touches, whether it's screens, catches, or just normal runs. You want him to have the ball in his hands and let him get to work. And so, I think they've got a real good player there.
I agree. First of all, Mark, thank you for everything. I really appreciate your breakdown. I learn every single week. It was a lot of fun. I'm always up for a Brian Robinson highlight reel. I love it. I love watching him. Thank you for that. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Arch. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Deuce, for jumping in the chats. That was a lot of fun. I love having this little watch party with all of us. We'll see you guys next Tuesday on the Commander Film Breakdown. If you have any other comments or questions, let us know in the chat. Let us know on the Twitter, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace out, y'all.